Hello, welcome to Real Life, Real Leaders. Today, we have Barbara Archer. Barbara is the managing director and partner at Hightower Wealth Advisors. She also is in the same network that I am at the Women Execs on Boards, and she's had a really fascinating career. So I'm very excited to introduce you to her and to hear a little bit about the path that she's had in her career so far. Barbara, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, Lisa. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you. So let's just start with your career. Tell me, just start with coming out of college. You know, where were you, and then what happened?
Sure.
And let's talk a little bit about that.
I graduated from the University of Dayton in Dayton, Ohio, and I graduated with a degree in medical technology. When I arrived at school, initially I wanted to be in pre-med or chemical engineering, and they said, "Oh no, you're a girl. You need to have a job if you graduate and don't get married and have kids right away." And I was like, yeah, those weren't in my plans anyway. But medical technology was the ability to use science and math background and work in a lab. Well, when I graduated, I knew that's not the career I wanted. So I went to my dean and complained a little, okay, maybe a lot. And he said, "Well, I can get you an interview at General Motors." I'm like, "Sure, why not?" So I went to the interview, and it was somewhat uncomfortable. I know there was affirmative action. This is in 76, and they had to get their little chits that they interviewed a woman. And so at the end, he said, "We really want a chemical engineer." And I said, "Well, I'm here. Please give me the opportunity to at least see the lab." Now, it's in a plant. And so it was a pretty large, dirty facility. And when he took me through the lab, it was very clear that it wasn't at medical standards, even though it was a quality control lab. And so at the end of the interview, I just sat down and asked him for his tablet, and I wrote down the 10 things that were totally wrong and said, "When you want these corrected and someone to run the lab, give me a call." And so they did.
Very good. That was brave.
Well, I had nothing to lose. I had a lot of loans. I needed a job. When I graduated, I was offered, even though I worked my way through school as a chemist in the hospital lab, they offered me a whopping 25 cents more an hour.
Wow. That's
and starting
incredible.
that job at General Motors was more than twice that, more than twice the total.
Yeah.
So
well, and, you know, just to back up for our listeners who might not be familiar with some of the terms here, might be international or something. So General Motors, you know, talk about the company a little bit and then tell us a little about the affirmative action.
Absolutely. So let's start with affirmative action, because that's actually what assisted me in getting an interview. There was a push in the 70s to try and reach out to women. And at the time, I'm not sure it was for minorities or not, but there was a push to get more women into industrial situations, into management, et cetera, unlike that we're experiencing today. Somewhat different
except that had teeth in it, right? Like today, we're sort of doing it because we realize it's a good thing. But
yes,
back then...
and they had some incentives for doing so. So It was interesting. And the division that I worked with, General Motors, is an automotive manufacturing company. And I worked for the Inland Division, which no longer exists. But at the time, we made brake hoses, motor mounts, steering wheels, dashboards. It was a very loud, noisy, boisterous, masculine,
yes, that's what I was going to say.
Place, but very unusual in that my very first night when I walked in, men don't have shirts on and they're quenching heat-treated steel. So it's hot, sweaty, kind of difficult manual labor. Yeah. And so that's what hit my eyes when I first walked through the doors. So it was a little bit of a surprise.
Yes, that's a different kind of a scene, I'm sure.
It was.
So, I do just want to make a quick comment about affirmative action because, I read everybody's book, right, left, whatever, on the political side, but I read Condoleezza Rice's book.
Yes.
And she talked about affirmative action, and she said something really good, I thought, which is, she believed in it because she wouldn't have had the opportunities to end up where she was if it weren't for affirmative action. So
I wouldn't have even had the interview. No, that's true.
Yeah. Sometimes we need policy to help us advance, right?
Absolutely. I felt it was a gift at that time.
Absolutely. I think, and, I think there are probably still some things that need policy today.
Absolutely.
Today's podcast is brought to you by EDA and Women Execs on Boards Network. EDA, formerly known as Executive Development Associates, provides leadership development for the top 5% of your organization with custom executive programs, C-suite coaching, succession planning, and more. For more information, please visit www.executivedevelopment.com. And Women Execs on Boards is a network of high-level and often high-profile women who have all completed governance education at Harvard Business School and who are working together to collectively advance the state of women on boards and in senior executive positions. We have a new inspirational leadership book about courage, adaptability, resiliency, sense-making, and vulnerability, all shared through the stories and the struggles of 36 of our women leaders. The book is called The Courage to Advance and will be available in North America on September 14th and in the rest of the world in December of 2021. You can pre-order an individual copy at Amazon.com, or for multiple books for your book clubs or other groups, please go to www.thecouragetoadvance.com. So tell me about after that, what happened? So you were there, you did a good job. You've obviously had a very good career. So tell us what happened after that.
Well, the additional opportunity there is that General Motors paid for my MBA. So I was able.
Opportunity.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was a wonder. I figured in 4 years I would be, or 3 years, I guess. I was working full time, going to school at night. So it took over 3 years to get that degree at night, but I was going to be that much older, so I might as well have something out of it. And it's the way I looked at it, it's almost like a raise, right? I mean, someone's
yes, it
paying. So it was, to me, a terrific opportunity. I enjoyed working there tremendously. They were very open to providing opportunities. What is different today versus then is you had to have thick skin. There was no one to complain to. I had to just have a sense of humor. And I think I'd mentioned to you previously about when I had comments that were very inappropriate.
Yeah, go ahead and tell about that, because I'd ask you ahead of time, like, what's some of the hardest things you went through, and you talked about that. So tell us that story.
Oh, okay. So my very first day, so I'm 21 years old, I walk in the plant and there are cat calls and things flying around the air, lots of words, lots of whistles, etc. And I just kept my head down, was very focused on getting to my lab and just getting there. The second day, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to do this every day. Now, I was on the third shift. So this is at 11 o'clock at night till 7 o'clock in the morning. So I thought, I have to do this every single day. How am I going to handle this? So the second day, I walked in, I stopped cold and just stood there while they're making noises and whistling and doing, kind of bad boy stuff. And I just said, come on, guys, louder. Can't hear you. I said, 4 years of college, I never got this much attention. Let's have more. Come on. And I said, and the name's Barbara. I'd rather you say good evening, hello, hi, something. Not really interested in everything else you're saying. And so they kind of laughed. And then after that, I guess, when it doesn't get under your skin, it's not fun to tease people when they're not receptive. Then it was just friendly and it was great. So that was not a problem. Peers, that's later on became a little bit of a problem. I had a gentleman that, as I got another promotion, said to me, "How does it feel to sleep your way up?" Which today, I guess people would report that.
Absolutely. Yes.
HR.
It would probably get them fired.
Right. And
but not then.
Not having any women there wasn't even a woman's restroom. So let's get straight about that. I mean, there were no women, zero. And so all I could say was, gee, I had no idea the couches were softer on the way up. So, what do you say? I mean,
exactly.
Why deny? Why to do? I mean, what are you going to say? I mean, these people, small minds, small parts. Yes. But anyway, I think it was a growth experience, so that from that time on, I never felt uncomfortable addressing situations. When I was at a pilot plant run, I sat with another reliability engineer who mentioned to me about the new car he bought and where he was moving. And I'm like, gosh, those are really expensive things to be doing. Now, I had a loan. I didn't know if he did or not. And he said, well, we all make X. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. We're all on the same level. Everyone makes the same. Sure. No, not true. Mm-hmm. So when I received my paycheck, I took it into the director and I said, I understand that the great company of General Motors has made a clerical error. They surely wouldn't discriminate against a woman when we're all doing the same job. So I'll just leave my check here and pick it up next week when you have it corrected. So today, what I would have done differently is I would have asked for the back pay.
That's good.
At the time, I couldn't have done that.
Appropriate, right. But that's very appropriate. You were brave enough to call them out on it and just say, I'll be back next week, which I love. But, I do want to take a minute to talk about that, because today it's very different in that, anyone who has the slightest bit of sexual harassment, is immediately turned in typically. So the latest movements have obviously advanced that quite a bit. But for us, we had to go through, you said in some notes ahead of time, you said that basically, I don't remember how you worded it, but that you just had to learn to let it roll off and not take it to heart and all of that.
Well, and we didn't have an option.
We didn't have an option. And we didn't, I don't know about you, but I actually didn't think much about it because it happens so often. You're just like,
sure. It was life.
That's just how it was. Exactly.
But you know what? Even today, though, I do wonder if sometimes we become overly sensitive.
I agree.
And I have to younger women out there that may be reading your book or thinking about this, Bonnie, one of the things I would say to them is, is it something you can address with the individual at the moment? Sometimes they might not know or think they're offending you or making you uncomfortable. And if you can let them know first and address it on your own, it doesn't have to escalate.
Well, that's a great point, because, maybe they think they're giving you a compliment. And
exactly.
And, for us, actually, a lot of times that's the way you thought of it, as, well, you're like, okay, not always. Sometimes it was totally inappropriate, but, sometimes it was just kind of a compliment. And I think you're making a really good point about don't overreact. Don't overreact about anything. Be sure that it's really an issue before you make it an issue.
Well, if you think back when we were younger, at 5 o'clock, or in my case, at 7 a.m, if you went to a bar for cocktails or you met friends after work, you wanted them to compliment you on your sweater or your new haircut, etc. So when you're at work, now men can't say that. Even if they say it in a flattering way, they have to stop and thinking like, oh, I can't even make a comment, even though they might, depending upon their age, they might mean it as a kindness.
Yes.
Or a way to become friendly. they can't maybe feel like they can talk about the baseball game or the football game or something, and they don't know their common ground, and their wife would appreciate it, and that's their only sense of how they can maybe start building even a professional relationship. So we have to teach them.
Great points. Those are all great points. Yeah, we do have to teach them and talk about things that are okay to say and not okay to say. But, I always say assume good intent in the beginning. And
thank you. That's
give
a good
them a
line.
Chance. So assume good intent. Okay, so you had this interesting start at General Motors, but then what happened?
Well, from there, I got married and moved to St. Louis. And
the show me state.
And I started working at Ralston Purina. A couple of things happened there. It was kind of interesting, and I wish I would have had your good advice at the time to assume good intent. When I first sat down during the interview, I had one gentleman that asked why I was interviewing for a job. And I said, pardon me? He saw my wedding ring and he said, well, you're married.
Oh,
it's like,
good grief.
Well, yes. He said, but this is for a director of marketing job. And I said, yes, I understand that. And he said, well, don't you want to stay home and take care of your husband? Don't you want to have kids? And I looked behind him and I saw he had 2 daughters, younger daughters. And I said, so if your daughters didn't get married and you paid for their education and they had really good degrees and they wanted to pursue a career, would you hold them back and tell them not to apply for a job because they should be looking for a husband and just get married and have kids? And he said, well, I never thought of it like that. Those are my daughters. And I said, well, I'm my father's daughter.
I'm somebody's daughter too.
And so he was a wonderful student. I feel like I really educated him on how many of us want careers and need opportunities. And he was wonderfully open as he realized that, the world was changing. Now, where I needed your line about having, assume good intent is when they made the offer to me, I got up and stormed out, packed everything up and said, I'm sorry. I mean, we are so far apart. I thought they were insulting me as a woman, what they were going to pay me. Mm. And so I was already at the elevator when the gentleman came down, asked me to come back to have a discussion so we could negotiate on the salary. And this is something every woman out there does need to know. Always ask for more.
Yes.
Always ask for more. And so I did, and I received more. And it wasn't until later I realized that the offer they gave me was already more than the gentleman before me had been making. So,
right. That was the assume good intent part, right?
Right.
They weren't insulting you. Yes. But it is easy sometimes to get the stories in our heads that may or may not be true.
It is. Well, and there's so much media hype and so much we hear that it is easier sometimes to go along with the crowd.
It is. That's so true. Yeah. Think for yourself, right?
Right.
So you got the job, or did you take that one?
I did take that job, and it was great. Had 3 or 4, I guess 4 good years there. Enjoyed it very much.
What did you do there? Chemicals?
Well, initially I worked in isolated soy protein. So,
and by the way, Purina is a dog food, cat food, right?
Dog food, cat food. It was at the time. There were many other divisions, large agricultural foods, horses, cows, pigs as well. Yes. The isolated soy protein was used in meat products as a binder, in baby food formulas, soy protein isolate, and also bodybuilders or people interested in high quality protein.
Okay.
So I did more industrial marketing, and then I made the big crossover, which was unusual at the time, to cat chow, consumer goods marketing.
Okay.
So I went to cat chow, and that was an interesting experience. It's where I realized they typically hired people right out of graduate school that didn't have as many diversified background experiences that I had. And so I was supposed to do these reports. There were like 7 or 8 reports every month. I did them the first month, and I realized how much there was so much redundancy.
Yes.
That I attached a note the second month to 4 of the 7, and I said, these will no longer be created. You can find the data in the other 3 reports. If you really need this, please let me know. And what I realized is, over time, people do things because they've always been done that way. And so it was probably some vice president wanted a different report. Some other vice president 2 years later wanted a different report. Well, they kept producing all these. So the time, General Motors was great for that. It's like, well, we've always done it this way. And I said, great, It's time to change.
Yes, you're reminding me of a story about, and you may have heard it already, but a young married woman starting to cook for her family comes in, and she's putting the roast in the oven. And so she cuts the ends off, puts it in the pan, puts it in the oven. And her new husband says, why do you cut the ends off the roast? And she said, well, I don't know, because Mama always did it. So he goes, well, call her and ask her why we cut the ends off the roast. She goes, okay. So she calls and gets Mom on the phone. She says, Mom, why do we cut the ends off the roast? She said, I don't know. My mom always did it. Let me call her. So she calls her mother, now grandmother, to the young bride. And she says, Mom, why do we cut the ends off the roast and before we put it in our pan and put it in the oven? She says, I have no idea why you do it. My pan was too small.
Oh. That's great.
So it's
on that same line, Bonnie, I'm going to give you my mother. When I got married, I've been married 40 years this year, and my mother told me, thanks, that she gave me the best piece of advice. I said, if you only can tell me one thing, what would that be? And she said, whatever you do in that first year of marriage, expect to do for the rest of your life.
Oh, that's
Otherwise,
good.
You're the one that's changed, right? So I had loved to cook. So I can remember cooking the first few nights. And then one night I stopped and I said, oh, Steve, I think it's your turn to cook. And he goes, oh, okay, great. I'm like, oh, that worked.
That's some expectations.
Yes. And then one time he said, I think I'm out of underwear. Do you have any whites you need to throw in? Well, I wasn't about to say I'm not putting my stuff in with yours, but but I said, no, just, I guess just get it done. And so that is something, again, it's teaching opportunities. It's what we enable sometimes others. So even in the marriage, it's what I remember then about any job, right? Whatever we're doing, people set expectations for us.
That is very true. And it's great advice, just to remember that if, when you do them, you are saying, I will do that. And you reminds me of another story. I'm big on stories. When Elizabeth Dole ran for president, I don't know if you saw it, but there was a particular day when there was a panel, and it was all it hadn't narrowed down yet. So there was about maybe 9, 10 people up there that were running for president. It was a fairly large number. And they were up on the stage, and everyone was sitting across the table. And Elizabeth Dole, and first of all, she had been doing a great job up until that point. She had wowed everyone with one of her speeches, getting down in the audience and, really being impressive. And then she stood up, she got the coffee, and she poured the coffee. And I thought to myself, you just lost.
Yeah.
Because, it set an expectation that wasn't what the role was.
And, isn't that interesting? Because we want to be servant leaders.
We do.
But women are more prone to do more serving than leading than the men in those situations.
That's correct. And it just, you have to think about the image that you're projecting.
Right.
And is it the right one? I'm fine to get everybody the coffee, if I need to now, but sure. I've been running the company for 20 years. So it's different than when you're trying to establish yourself in the leadership role. So we do have to be adaptable. But one of the things I'll break. It's okay. So I noticed though in your career you do quite a turn from you're like in these manufacturing plants, or I guess that's what would you, they're not manufacturing. What would you call it? Manufacturing?
Yeah, we manufactured component parts for automobiles. Yeah.
Well, but then the cat food and the dog food, the cat food, all that. And then you do a hard turn. Is that where you turn next? And you end up in finance.
Yes.
So tell me what happened?
Well, I focused really on finance and marketing when I was getting my MBA. And as I got into cat chow, I realized, I don't know what I thought it was going to be like. I thought it'd be a lot of fun, more advertising, more creative, more interesting. And I think if I'd have stayed longer, it gets to that point. But I don't know if you remember Chow Chow Chow, Patsy.
I do. Yes, I do.
So here's an example. I went to my first advertising meeting. The gentlemen, they were all guys patting each other on the back, this great storyboards. Everything was so cool. They really loved it. And the tagline was supposed to have changed to helping cats live a longer, healthier life. I said, that sounds great. Except I told them, I said, I don't understand the storyboard. And they said, what? I said, I don't understand the storyboard. And they said, yeah, Patsy comes in and goes, chow, 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 and dances with the cat. And I said, but if it's a nutritional brand, why don't you have a person in tennis shoes? Why don't you have someone that looks like they really care about nutrition and fitness? And they all looked at each other and go, okay, you fire Patsy. And I was like, great. So, I mean, it's interesting. Again, it's perspective, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And it's why you and I are interested on Women on Boards. It's the woman that speaks up.
Yes.
It's like, this doesn't look right to me.
You're exactly right.
It either takes some guts or, some, maybe just the fact that we can be more objective, step back, because we're not one of the guys in the, I hadn't been out drinking with them the night before. I don't know.
Well, you bring up a great point, because women often are more likely to speak up. But we talk about this in our network, which is we need both, right? We need both perspectives. Men and women actually truly do think and behave differently. I see it all the time in leadership. Women are naturally usually more collaborative, and men are naturally usually more competitive. And I don't mean to generalize, because there's certainly some who are the other, but we need both of those things in order to run a really healthy organization.
Absolutely.
And so we do need more women on the boards, which we're both passionate about.
Yeah.
And I want to get to that too.
My twist to the wealth management. So obviously I wasn't really thrilled with my job there at the time. So we had hired a wealth advisor soon as we had gotten married. And every time we'd meet, I'd ask difficult questions. I guess that's one of my talents, asking difficult questions. And I realized that they really hadn't a background in statistic analysis, their ability to do in-depth research, all the things that probably with my science background and then the finance that I was capable of doing. And I thought, I could give this a try. And if it doesn't work, I can get a real job again. So that was 37 years ago.
Wow.
And I love it. I'm passionate about it. And when I started, I looked at all the different options of what I wanted to do versus what was available. And obviously, back in the 80s, there were mostly men. Think of stockbrokers. Yes. There weren't many financial planners. What I wanted was the ability to serve people similar to my family, where someone holistically looked at the situation. I didn't care just about the investments. I wanted to know the risk management, and risk could be anything from insurance risk to the risk of a portfolio. I wanted someone that understood how things should be titled, what kind of legal documents were appropriate for the age or the time or where I was living, what was appropriate, beneficiary designations. So many little pieces of the puzzle that no one seemed to put together at the time. And it was a very dicey time to decide to do this, because that was in 1983. And you could put money in a money market and make over 14%. So,
well, those days are gone.
Long gone. Of course, yes. Mortgages were 14, 15, 16%.
Outrageous. Yes, they were. Yes. So that's really interesting.
My transition. But interestingly, the financial planner that we had been working with, a young man, was a mentor to me. He was very supportive and said, here's what I did. Here's how I put this together. These are the things I thought about. So he was a good first coach.
Maybe he's a better teacher than he was a financial planner.
Well, yes, I figured that out. But he was a very good person, and he was very highly ethical. Yes, he just didn't have the depth of background. I mean,
right. And your background just sort of lends you to be one who would do the deep dive. But what I love about what you said, though, is the holistic thinking, because I actually had the same experience with a financial planner early on. It's just, it was so, siloed. And
rewarding.
So, yes. And I did what you did. In fact, I haven't really had one since because I said, I think I can do it myself just as well, because
Bonnie, we should talk.
We should talk because there are so many pieces to move around. And so you go and you start your own business. Is that what you did, or did you join another?
Well, the young man that had the company that he was with, for the first year, I rented space, hired a secretary, bought a computer, which at the time we called, it was a portable computer. It was a compact, so it was a luggable. It was the size of a suitcase.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. And after a year, I was supposed to be able to be a partner and buy in and buy up once I had licenses and a little experience under my belt, et cetera. And these guys said, I think we have enough partners. So that was it. Then I started.
Good for you.
My own.
Yes. So I had an Apple IIe.
Oh, did you? You were cutting edge.
I've always been an early adapter. I usually get in front of the trend, sometimes too far.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I didn't have one of the portable ones. Probably good, though, since they were gigantic.
Oh, it was huge. I mean, it probably weighed 40 or 50 pounds. It was awful. And it had that little tiny green screen.
Oh, gosh. Yes. And then if you could connect to the internet, it had like the dial tone and baby.
Oh, well, first of all, there was no internet.
Not at first, right.
Right. And so I laugh now whenever some of my younger associates, when they talk about, I have a terrific team, and they say, well, they're a little bit older, maybe they don't really use email and they don't get on the internet much. And I'm like, hey, time out, guys. The boomers invented the internet.
Yeah.
There was no email. There was no internet.
Exactly. Like
for your age, didn't exist.
Yeah, we had to figure it out. And I don't know about you, but I've adapted really well. I can get mad in less than 1 minute if it isn't connected to the internet.
Yes.
I've adapted to high speed. So
absolutely.
So what are you doing today? So are you still running your company? I know that you're looking at boards and probably on some boards. So
yes,
talk about today.
Well, today I'm still on some not-for-profit boards. I'm on a for-profit board as well. And it's really cutting edge and really fun.
That's
so
exciting.
A little bit of manufacturing. It's a technology knitting company. I mean, you could even knit a round ball, kind of 3D printing. It's very cool.
Really?
So that's
interesting.
Yeah, it's really fun. And I am still, I'm doing more of the strategic planning for the company. and some business development, and still seeing many of my long-term clients. I still have my first client since 1983. So we have very long term. We are serving 2 and 3 generations, getting ready for the 4th. So we're doing generational planning, legacy planning. We have a great tagline that we use, and that is make a plan, make an investment, make a difference. So the fun part of our job now is some of the charitable planning, the philanthropic education we do. And it's nice when people have enough money and we help them determine how much is enough so that they can do more good. So,
yes. And that's part of the holistic planning, right? If you have the holistic planning, then you're able to make enough, have enough cash flow in order to be able to do some of those really wonderful things about giving back and investing in other people.
And one of the things we can do too, especially in our group, since we can direct where our investments go, we can have them be socially responsible. We can encourage more diversity on boards. There's all different ways if people are interested in the justice system. There are ways to make investments that do make a difference on a day-to-day basis. So if you're interested in just sustainable agriculture, being a vegan, I think that's kind of a cool thing to do. So it's really interesting, how much control we all have of not only our own wallets, but of voting in different ways, voting with our dollars and as well as our voices.
Well, that's a great thing to say because as we're filming this, it's election day. And we do vote in different ways. But you're right. Being able to find something you really care about and give back in one way or another is a powerful experience. And actually, it feels better than being the taker. Like it feels better to be the giver.
It does. Well, and that's my next transition because for so many years I've coached many of my clients into retirement. If they've sold businesses, they're making transitions. And so that's what I hope to do to make more of an impact as well on helping people find that purpose in their lives and to have more happiness in their portfolios and to make a difference. So it's,
So you believe in that companies shouldn't be all about making money?
You can do both.
You can do both.
Right. Why not do both? Well, we don't have to choose.
Yes, that's right. That's a good point because we can be more than just money.
Right.
So looking
we better
back,
be.
Though, yeah, right, exactly. Because I always think about, you can't just go up, 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 up forever. No company does that. And so, there's always the downturns and there's the hard times, and it just needs to be more than just money, or you won't want to go through that. You'll just want to go get on the next train that's going up.
But you look at the life cycles of companies, and it's not terribly different than the life cycles of ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. There are times when you need to pivot, you need to change. Obviously, I've done that in my career and now in my life. What is it that it takes now to stay curious, engaged, have fun, make a difference in people's lives, in our communities? How do we impact the people around us, the boards we sit on, the companies that we serve? We all have that opportunity, and it's great fun to step back and reevaluate ourselves every year and say, what could we be doing better, smarter, differently?
That's a good habit to get in. Valerie Robert, another one of our network members, was talking about how she and her husband do that for their family and their relationship. Is that twice a year they sit down and they have some time just to talk about what's working, what needs some adjustment. And I like what you're saying there. We can do that with our own career and our vision for our career, which is to find a time every year where we sit down and think about it and maybe make adjustments.
Right. Well, and there's a lot of opportunity from the philanthropic part, and that is, so for example, if a family has a donor advised fund, to get the children involved earlier. so that they have some say into how donations are made, so that they have a feeling of a part of the family philanthropic mission.
Yeah, this is what we do. This is what we care about. That's good. So looking back at your career, was the hardest thing that you went through the time that you had to work in the plant that you were telling us about?
At the time, it seemed like the hardest thing.
It sounds hard, actually. Were you ever afraid?
Oh, yes.
Talk about that a little bit.
So when I suspended a gentleman that met me out in the parking lot with a gun, that was disconcerting.
That's disconcerting.
Yeah. So
very few people can say that.
Yeah, and have a little conversation about how important it was to him and to his family to make good choices and do the right thing. One of the things I did not realize is I had several what were called hardcore unemployed individuals that worked for me.
What does that mean?
They were all hourly workers. I had no idea what that meant. So I finally called HR and asked what it meant. It meant that they had served time.
Oh, I wouldn't have known that either.
I didn't know that. Well, you don't use those words, right?
Yes.
So the one gentleman that had served time for manslaughter was the guy that stood outside the men's room so I could use it. Because he was the scariest guy. No one would bother me.
He was your security. That's awesome. Love that. Okay, so but the guy who held the gun to you, what did you do in that scenario?
Well, I looked towards the security gate and I didn't see anyone in the booth. So my heart was pounding. I mean, it really is interesting when they talk about that fight or flight. Sometimes I thought I felt it. That moment, I really felt it.
Yes.
And so it was just having a conversation that it was only a suspension. He would be back at work. If he did something, that couldn't be changed or irrevocable, it could damage him for the rest of his life, and his family was depending on him. So you really go for the heart, right? So we could have a little bit of a conversation. He did apologize when he came back off of suspension. He was very frustrated. He was scared. We have to remember people have their own issues too.
They do.
It's just, it's easier to be judgmental.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And having that compassion, obviously, it sounds like, first of all, you lived through it. And second, did he get to keep his job?
Yes. He did. I didn't report that.
That's saying something because, a lot of times that would not have happened, right?
Well, and the discussion was if he just made a really good decision and just, you need to put the gun away and just go home. And, when you come back to work, we can all pretend it never happened. I mean, he was in tears when he came back.
Yeah.
The guy was, was going to make a very bad mistake.
Absolutely.
We have to really stop and think about even what's going on today, right? People make some bad decisions in the moment. And it doesn't mean they meant to be a bad person. It was a bad decision. So, and we don't know what's going on inside their heads or their homes or their mental stability. There's so many unknowns. And if we can be the bigger, better person and try to understand, sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. Sometimes we're going to be upset, angry. I was scared. That didn't change my being scared.
But you were compassionate. And, one of the things that I do when I'm teaching, especially like young high potentials, is, if someone comes in, let's say they're sharp with you or harsh would be a better word, try to give them some grace because perhaps they slept on the couch last night or,
right.
We don't know what we don't know. And if we give people some grace, that usually will come back to us.
That's kind. Yep. I like that. And so with the young people that you're training for leadership, I have to ask you this question. So excuse me for asking you a question.
Please go ahead.
do you teach them to have balance in their lives? Or do you ever ask them if they have balance in their lives?
Well, no, because I don't ask them. Because what I have found is that the young people today are more likely to have a much more of a family life and are a balanced life, I guess, than we do. Now,
Yeah.
what I do is the one thing I do is as a leader myself, I do try to not send out anything on the weekends or even in the evenings, although I'm known to, put the delay on so that it comes in first thing in the morning.
Yes.
But like that, it's just different. And so usually I don't ask that. Once in a while, though, there are some of the younger people who are working way too hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that especially in some of the tech startups, to where they will work all night, night after night, and barely getting enough sleep. So occasionally there has to be that. But typically what I say is, try to come give your employer what they are paying for and give them 100% when you're there, and then go home and enjoy the rest of your life.
That's great. I just thought of the probably second most difficult time, though, as you
Tell
were
me about
saying
that.
It's probably for many of us being that sandwich generation, caring for our parents and then also for children.
Yes.
And feeling pulled in so many ways. And I will tell you, I always was delighted to be at work because it's something I felt I had more control of and I could focus on.
Yes.
But I always laughed when someone would talk about, how do you balance your lives? And it's like, balance. I work too much. I play too hard when I do get to play. Whatever it is, it's like,
Right.
it's not a balance. It's a choice at that moment of how I'm spending my time. So it's just an interesting question as I see other people answer that. And especially as I see more and more people, especially now during COVID, where some people have children moving back home, which the kids would have never thought they'd be moving back home. They were independent.
A lot of people have kids moving back home.
Right. And having.
So I want to come back. Go ahead.
No, and I was going to say, and parents that might be living in another place that you can't see because of quarantine. So, there's so many different stressors. Hard. So many stressors.
Yes, I agree. I noticed the other day that people have a lot of just sort of things that they're doing to sort of self-soothe. It's like, well, I have to have a candle burning, or I have to stop and go for a walk. Like, it was like we have to do something to sort of work through the stress that we're all feeling because of COVID. But I want to come back to the sandwich generation. But before I do, I did want to comment on the whole work-life balance thing. So I have no balance whatsoever. But I work.
Love hearing it. Thanks for being honest.
Yes, I work all the time. So, but I will say, well, I don't work all the time, but I'm like you. I work hard, play hard, and then I crash and I can't get up for like 3 days.
There you go.
I'll work hard, play hard for months, and then I'm like comatose. But I have noticed that the people who make it to the top of organizations generally are not that balanced. And so, there is a price to pay for being the ones who make it to the top. But let's go back to your sandwich generation comment. So tell us about that. What was hard and how did you get through it?
Oh, well, I went through a period where my father was ill and I had young children. I would say that having the right spouse in your life can make life a little easier. My husband was extremely supportive when I'd have to fly back to help my mom and with my dad. And then taking care of young children during the day. We didn't have the child care opportunities. So I can tell you honestly, my 4 best years with children at home of my married life was when I had a nanny, because she really took care of so many things. I mean, I love this woman. She was just made a difference. And I do envy, I had no family near me throughout our entire marriage. So I really was envious of those individuals that had their parents, which were their grandparents, helping care for children, or brothers or sisters, or someone that was a family member that could help out in areas where the kids got sick, or you had to travel, or your plane was late, or whatever might have come up. Those periods of time were often, when I look back, more stressful because I was trying to juggle. And my husband worked overseas a lot too, so I have the greatest respect for single parents. I mean, the greatest respect, because basically for those years that he was gone, I was a single parent.
You were a single parent.
No family nearby. And I always remember, if I had to schedule, there was nothing I hated more than to have to reschedule a client, right? Because I was basically asking them to help me out of this situation. If I had a sick kid.
That's a good way to look at it. And, it's so much work. Like, you don't even realize it when you're in it. So for young parents, anyone who might be listening, you don't realize how much extra work you're doing until you're not doing it anymore.
Right.
When your kids grow up a little bit. And I think there's probably some grace for that, right? Like thank goodness that we don't realize.
I think people are more understanding now. I really do. I mean, because men participate more in the family caregiving.
Yes, it's much more family oriented.
Sure. So I think there is more acceptance versus, and I don't know how much we've in the early years put on ourselves we wore those little stupid bow ties with men's suits and skirts. I mean,
yes, because we had to look like men.
Yes. I mean, yuck. What were we thinking?
Good question. I don't know.
For success, right? Yikes. But that's, so I would tell people to, especially women, mothers, to be kinder to themselves than perhaps we were.
Yes.
And I'd
be willing to get help.
Yes. Ask for
whether
help.
It's a family or whether if you can afford a nanny, be willing.
Or neighbors.
Get help.
Or let your boss know you're going through a stressful time so they understand too.
Absolutely.
So,
just thinking about, your career, and if you could just say anything to leaders who are still out there really, in the fight and going through some difficult times, or maybe not, but they will eventually. And so, any sort of words of wisdom you want to leave with the audience or the readers?
I would say stay curious and objective. Don't just accept what you're told or given. Do some of your own research. Make sure that what you're being told or what you see is in fact the truth, and that it's not tainted by someone's their emotions or their own agenda.
That's great advice today on election day.
There you go. If only we knew what the real platforms were for the agendas, and we could vote.
Oh no, nobody knows.
It's tough.
So yes, exactly. That's great advice. Thank you. And thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us today. I appreciate it. And I know a lot of people will really enjoy hearing about your story.
Well, thank you, Bonnie. It's always a pleasure to see you, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
A special thank you to our listeners for taking time to tune in to this week's Real Life, Real Leaders podcast. We hope today's story inspired you. Check out previous episodes on the podcast to hear from more industry leaders, and check back next week as we speak to another leader and hear his or her great stories of triumphs and messy struggles. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate, subscribe, and share. I'm Bonnie Hagemann, and I look forward to sharing more with you next week.